I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm not an economist. I am a would-be theologian and a pastor of a church that's populated by people that are within minutes of where this will be built. So I think we've got a right to raise some concerns and a right to ask some questions. And that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough. And I think it's also fair enough as Christians that we do what the Word of God says, what Jesus said, that we are salt and light. That in other words, where there's darkness and where there's something, we read Paul in Ephesians 4, where he says, bring those things that are in darkness to light and bring them out in the open. Let's see what's going on here. And I think that's fair enough too, that as Christians we do that as well. Jesus said that we're to be salt, we're to be light, we're to be people that can influence society for good. There's a number of books that are coming out now. One is called What the World Would Look Like If Jesus Had Never Come. Another one is 7 great men who have made a difference because of Jesus. And if you think, if you've ever seen that Jimmy Stewart movie, A Wonderful Life, you ever seen that one? No one's ever seen that. You need to get out more. In this story, Jimmy Stewart, and I won't try my Jimmy Stewart impression. Actually, Kim told me tonight, please don't tell any jokes. In the story of The Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart is having a terrible time in his business and he's feeling depressed and it's Christmas time and he hasn't got any money to support his family and he's going to toss himself. And so he's on the bridge and he's ready to do away with himself. And an angel appears to him. And the angel says, what are you doing? And of course, he doesn't know it's an angel. And he says, well, my life is terrible. It's a failure. It hasn't amounted to anything. I've made a mess of it all and I'm just going to do away with myself. And the angel says to him, can I show you something? And it's then he begins to suspect that this is an angel because he takes him back in time. And Jimmy's a spectator now in time at how different the whole world would be if he hadn't been born. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? And he sees what a terrible place the town in which he spent most of his life would be if he hadn't been born, the influence that he's had on people who have in turn had an influence on people. And if we did that with Jesus Christ, imagine the difference this world would be today if it wasn't for Jesus. So we as Christians have a right, and I dare say even a responsibility to speak up about certain things. And so when we suspect that something's not right, I think it's well within our right and, dare we say, prerogative and responsibility to ask and inquire and just begin to raise certain issues. And if we don't get any satisfactory answer, to even begin to say, well, we don't agree with what you're doing. And I think that's quite reasonable to do that. And a part of the process has been that we have raised issues that we've seen as maybe lacking in truthfulness. And in my original document of, is this the pulp mill John West would reject? I raised the issue that, we've got a company that said they were going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the day that the IIS, their Integrated Impact Statement, was published, 1, 2, 3, 4 have vanished. And just the question is, why did you do that? I think that's a reasonable question. So I've explored that directly with the company and put their response in the document. And you can weigh up both sides because we raise some other issues as well. But here's, for me, the bottom line. As Christians, we are not just concerned about what happens here on a Sunday. We're very concerned about what happens to you and your neighbours and this community on a Monday. Is that right? We care about this community. We don't just care whether people are converted. We want to see people come to know Christ, and I'm going to share more about that in a moment. But what we really want is the welfare, the safeguarding and truthfulness in our society. I mean, God help us, literally, God help us if we haven't got that. So that's why I think this is really, really important. And I've got to say, some of the response I've had from parliamentarians and business people has been pathetic. Not dismal, just pathetic. Because sometimes when I've asked questions about, what do you do with Curtin University? Professor Wadsley, I think his name is, where he raises, errors in Gunn's statements. Well, what do you do with that? And the response has been, he's just scaremongering. Look, that's someone forming a judgment about his motive. Look, put that aside for the moment. What's the response? This guy's a PhD in mathematics, similar to myself. I'm sorry, but I can't help it. The three things I'm not good at in maths: numbers and counting. And so this guy raises some serious questions, and it's not met with a response, it's met with a slander. As Christians, I think we need to say, hang on, if the truth is on someone's side here, let it come out, please. I think that's fair enough. When the AMA say that they did exactly the same modelling as the company that are proposing this mill, and by the way, when Kim ran for council, she ran on a pro-pulp mill. This would be good for the thing. If it meets the guidelines, let it go ahead. And pretty much that was my stance on it as well. I thought, yeah, well, great, economy, jobs, all the rest of it, fantastic. And I've said to Guns directly, and I've published it, if everything the proponent says is true, we should stand back and cheer. We should go for it, guys. This will be really good if everything they say is true. But here's the problem. You've got a number of experts that are saying it's not only not true, it's not true by a long way. The AMA say that the number of airborne particulates, that is the pollution emitted from the chimney stack, has been understated by 500%. That's the AMA. And the response is, they're just scaremongering. And I just find that irrational. I find that's not an answer. Someone's right, someone's wrong. They can't both be right. And as a Christian, I'm concerned that I'm spectating in this, and I'm hearing this debate going, this is madness. What's the truth? When the Swedish assessor to the RPDC, that was Becca Amick, when they advised the RPDC that this particular proposal, this particular location for the proposal, fails to meet the environmental guidelines. Well, I think it's a reasonable question to say, well, why, when the RPDC wrote to Guns 3 times advising them of that, so we need more information, otherwise it doesn't meet the guidelines. I think it's quite reasonable to say, well, why didn't Guns respond? I just think that's reasonable. When we have people like Naomi Edwards from Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, one of the world's leading accountancy firms, say that for every $1 that pulp mill could put into the Tasmanian economy, it will deprive the Tasmanian economy in other sectors of $3.75. Well, is she right or is she wrong? I just think, well, hang on, before we go ahead, we need to get that question answered. I think that's reasonable. So and I've had people say, but Andrew, you're not an economist, what's this got to do with you? And one of the worst things I had someone say to me is, well, Andrew, what has this got to do with the church? You just keep preaching the Bible and stick your nose out of this. I've got to tell you that if you want me to stick my nose out of something, that ain't the way to do it. That's like waving a red rag to a lead goose. In joke. But really, and one of my colleagues who read a letter out when one of the parliamentarians wrote to nearly every pastor in the city warning them against me and warning them against believing the questions. The questions. I mean, can you believe that? Believing the questions that I was asking. And said, don't you be seen associating with that Andrew Corbett because you could look very, very silly, which to me sounds like a threat, but apparently it's not. When one of my colleagues got that, he said, I smell a rat, which is Greek for something's not right here. What's going on? And as Christians, I think that's quite a reasonable question to ask. So, if you'll bear with me, I want to illustrate everything I've just said right now. Would you please turn to Philippians chapter 3.